Good morning to this webinar of the USME Center. Today we will have the topic of today is the China Telecom Catalogue 2015, key changes and impacts for the telecoms, media and technology SMEs in China. But before, let me introduce you the USME Center. The USME Center is a European funded project which helps USMEs to get ready to do business in China and provide a wide range of information and advice, training and support services. The USME Center is implemented by 6 partners. You have the logos of the 6 partners here and is led by the China-Britain Business Council. During the webinar, you have a panel where you can submit text questions and we will have our speaker, Barbara Lee, answering during her presentation. But at the end of the presentation, we also will have a Q&A session. And now let's start with the webinar. The China Telecom Catalogue 2015, key changes and impacts for TMT SMEs in China. The Ministry of Information Technology released a revised catalogue of the telecommunications in December 2015 and entered into force the 1st of March of this year. This catalogue has brought many changes to the previous ones and will have a direct impact to the business sector in China, especially also for SMEs. And today our speaker, she will tell us what are the policy tools for innovation and digitization in China, what are the market entry requirements for foreign investment in this sector. She will also tell us the different categories for value-added telecommunication services, and she will give us finally advice for the European SMEs looking to do business in China in this sector. Our speaker today we have Barbara. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
She is a corporate lawyer at Northern Rose. In fact, she's the partner and she's based here in Beijing. She has been dealing with many corporate and commercial matters, mergers and acquisitions, and cross-border counseling, both for inbound and outbound sides. Barbara has abundant experience in advising on regulatory issues, and she's also quite well known at the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China because she's very involved in different working groups there. Barbara also has graduated from the China University Law and Political Science University here, and also the King's College London University. She's a solicitor in England and Wales and also a PRC bar qualification certificate. She's a native Chinese speaker and also fluent in English. And now I will give the floor to Barbara.
Thank you very much, Xavier, for the introduction. Hi, good morning, everyone in Europe. Today, I'm very honored to be here at this webinar to talk about the China Telecom Catalogue 2015. As Xavier introduced at the beginning, this catalog was issued toward the end of last year, and it has become effective from the 1st of March this year. This catalog has brought many key changes to the companies doing business in China. Especially, it has substantive impacts for TMT companies, large and SMEs, for doing similar business in China. Okay, so in the next in the next 30 minutes or so, I will walk through certain key changes relation to the China Telecom Catalogue. We will look at the key provisions, and also I will share with you what kind of impacts it will have to companies, to SMEs, and doing the TMT business in China. And finally, I will share some insights and our experience in working with companies doing business in this area.
We just have a little technical problem that we are hoping to solve, so maybe you're not seeing now the slides changing, but we are working on this.
Yeah. So hopefully that technical problem has been resolved. So yeah, and anyway, I'll speak slowly. So even though you cannot see the slides in front of you, I will give as much as detailed explanation on the content. So hopefully, even though you cannot see the slides, that will not affect you very much. So firstly, on the first slide, I would like to briefly talk about the booming of the China TMT industry. Yeah, for those people who have been following the China TMT industry closely, you probably have been aware that the TMT industry in China has developed and promoted very quickly and a very quick phase in the past several years. And one important feature for the China TMT industry is that this sector is not monopolized by SOEs, by the Chinese state-owned companies. This is quite different from the industry where you can find from the energy or infrastructure industries in China. For example, for energy industry, basically you see most of the large players in those industry sectors are Chinese state-owned companies. But for TMT, in the past 10 years or so, actually the most active industry players in this industry are private companies and also SMEs. So it could be, I think it's a valid comment that in the TMT industry, there's a lot more market orientation and competition in this industry than other industry sectors in China. And also for this industry, it has received a lot of support and policy promotion from the central government in China. If you can see the slide, you can see I have listed quite a few policy initiatives promoted by the Chinese central government in the past several years. For example, in 2014 and 2015, the Chinese central government, like the State Council, they have issued the Internet Plus initiative, which means the Chinese authority would very much encourage innovations and digitalization for the Chinese infrastructure and all kinds of industry sectors. And also for last year, the Chinese authority has promoted another policy, which is Intelligent Manufacturing 2025, which means Chinese authority would like the Chinese manufacturing industry to be upgraded by using the internet innovation and technology. And also similar policies can be found in the more recent policies which were issued in the National People's Congress, 2 sessions in the past months, and also in the 13th 5-year plan. So all this shows that the innovation and the digitalization and the promotion of Chinese TMT industry have been very much encouraged by the Chinese authority. So now we move on to the next slide. For the next slide, you can see we have listed a couple of points in relation to foreign ownership requirements for entering into this sector. So for a foreign company, for example, if a European company wishes to do business in China, to enter the China market by doing business in relation to TMT, the first question you need to ask is whether there is any foreign ownership restriction for foreign investors into this market. So for quite some industry sectors in China, there are still the market entry barriers. For example, in the TMT sector, for a foreign company comes to China to do business here, in relation to this industry sector, you need to firstly figure out what kind of services or business you try to do. because the different industry sectors would be subject to different foreign ownership restrictions. For example, if you are going to do something in relation to mobile operation, and that kind of business falls within the category of basic telecom services. So for basic telecom services, a foreign company can only have up to 49% equity in that company. So which means you still have to set up a joint venture with a local company, and also in that joint venture, as a foreigner, you cannot have the controlling or majority equity in that company. And so that's why in practice we have not seen many international companies have set up business in the basic telecom services. And then if you want to do something differently, for example, if you want to deliver cloud computing business, or if you want to do a call center, and then those services would be categorized into a different subcategory, which is called the value-added telecom services. In a short name, always called as VATS, VATS. For VATS, for value-added telecom services, a foreign company can have a little bit more flexibility in terms of foreign ownership. So normally for value-added telecom services, a foreign company can have up to 50% equity in the joint venture. And this means you cannot have a 100% foreign-owned company in doing value-added telecom services, and you still have to team up with a local partner to set up a joint venture to do value-added telecom services. And the above foreign ownership restrictions apply not only to telecom industry, they also apply to internet industry. Because in China, from the regulator perspective, industry-related services and support generally are regarded similar to telecom services. So that's why for the catalog we're talking about, the China Telecom Catalog, that will apply to industry services in China. Okay, so the foreign ownership restrictions, either 49% or 50% restrictions I just mentioned. So those restrictions apply to all foreign investment in China, in TMT in China on a national basis. But something good news to know is that for some special areas such as a free trade zone, actually the foreign ownership restrictions for certain services have been relaxed for the free trade zone. The first relaxation we have seen happens in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. So probably you have been aware that in China, the central authority has approved 4 free trade zones in China. Shanghai Free Trade Zone is the first one, and another 3 free trade zones are located in Tianjin, which is a port city, North China, and also another 2 free trade zones located in Xiamen, which is in Fujian, in southeast China, and also in Guangdong, in Guangzhou, in the city which is closer to Hong Kong. So the relaxation first take place in Shanghai Free Trade Zone, and also according to the authority, the other 3 free trade zones will be able to enjoy similar relaxations and favorable treatment in the same way as the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. And so those free trade zones are intended to act as an experimental field to test some relaxed policies. So if those policies are tested to go well in those free trade zones, the central authorities are planning to roll out those relaxation policies to a wider scope in China. And turning back to Shanghai Free Trade Zone, in terms of the specific relaxation for the services, for Shanghai Free Trade Zone, for the e-commerce and also for multi-party communication services and also for the apps services. So the foreign ownership for those services have been relaxed. For example, for e-commerce, now there is basically no foreign ownership restriction, which means as a foreign investor, you can have your 100% subsidiary to set up in China to do e-commerce, to do cross-border e-commerce business in China. And also the similar relaxation has also happened for the offshore call center. For example, if you are a foreign investor and you wish to set up a call center in China to serve your customers located outside China, and then for such a call center, you do not have to set up a JV. So basically, for such a call center, you can have your 100% subsidiary in China to do business in that area. So for those, so you can see, generally speaking, the trend is that the government will likely relax the market entry barriers for companies in the TMT sector. So even though the steps for relaxation may not be huge in a one lump sum, but it will change gradually with a view to liberalizing the market in this area. So this has presented huge opportunities for SMEs in China. For example, in my work in practice, we have received lots of queries from international SMEs trying to capture the e-commerce or call center business in China. Okay, so we now move to the next slide. For this slide, this outlines the development of a China Telecom Catalogue. So for this catalog, this was firstly drafted and issued in 2000, and then there have been 2 amendments which happened in 2001 and 2003. And then in 2013, the authority, they have been aware that the previous draft of the catalog have not been able to catch up with the technical and market developments in this area. So in 2013, a draft catalog has been issued for consultation. And then it has been 2 years for the consultation and for the authority to finalize the final draft. So then the most recent draft was issued by MIIT, which is the telecom industry regulator in China, on the Christmas Eve in 2015. And finally, this new catalog has become effective just from the first day of last month, from the 1st of March 2016. And then we move on to the next slide. And for this slide, we are going to talk about what are the new changes, the key changes, which are reflected from the new catalog 2015. So firstly, we can tell that the catalog has imposed certain relaxations for some telecom services. For example, for telecom resale services, so that services before have not been widely opened to domestic companies. And now under the new catalog, it has provided clearly that telecom resale services are now opened to domestic companies. So, for example, for a company which does not have the telecom spectrum in China, and if it still wishes to do the telecom services, actually it can sign a contract with major telecom operators in China, such as China Telecom, China Unicom, and then the mobile operator, and then the international company can buy certain spectrums from China Unicom or China Telecom, and then it can do the mobile resale business. And then we move on to the next slide. For the next slide, here you can see the new catalog has defined certain telecom and internet services more clearly than before. One of the most important features under the catalog is the clear definition of cloud computing. You probably have been aware that cloud computing has developed very quickly, especially in the past 1 or 2 years. A lot of international companies, both large or small SME, with special expertise in cloud computing are very keen to participate in the China TMT market to deliver cloud computing. And actually, cloud computing in China, the technology for local developers or local business operators are kind of left behind the international developers or the operators. So that's why from the commercial and technical perspective, the cloud computing has presented very good opportunities for international companies which have expertise in cloud computing. And before in the previous catalog, there was no clear definition of cloud computing. So that's why when some international companies wish to do cloud computing in China, people have struggled in the past. What kind of business their services would be categorized, and again what kind of a permit they would need to have for the purpose of delivering cloud computing. But now under the new catalog, cloud computing, the definition as listed in the slide actually is quite similar to the cloud computing, the definition of cloud computing, which has been widely used in the international market. And under the new catalog, the provisions are pretty clear that if a company wishes to deliver cloud computing in China, then normally, generally speaking, it would need to have a permit for cloud computing. And then we move on to the next slide. For the next slide, we're going to look at the call centers. Call centers is also something which has been developed, has been promoted very quickly and widely in China. In the previous draft of the catalog, even though there are provisions about call centers, the previous provisions do not define the call centers clearly. But in the current catalog, the call centers are divided, classified into 2 different subcategories. One is called domestic call center. The other one is called offshore call center. And the domestic offshore call centers, they have the catalog have imposed different definition and different features. For example, under the catalog, domestic call centers are referred to those call centers which provide the call center services to the clients to serve Chinese customers primarily. For example, if you are going to set up a call center to provide services to major Chinese e-commerce operators such as Alibaba or Tmall or JD.com. And because the customers, you provide the call center services to Chinese customers, and then your call center will be regarded as domestic call center. But on the other hand, if you are going to set up a call center to serve basically your customers are located outside China, and then that call center will be regarded as an offshore call center. And again, if your call center is an offshore call center, and then you do not have to subject your call center to the VATS, to the 50% foreign ownership restriction, which means if you're going to set up an offshore call center to serve your overseas customers, you can have your 100% wholly foreign owned enterprise in China. And also the process for you to obtain the permit is a lot easier and quicker. Okay, and then we move on to the next slide. For the next slide, that is regarding the categorization of value-added telecom services. Under this current draft of the catalog, the catalog has provided for two types of value-added telecom services, type 1 and type type 1 and type 2. And also it's interesting to note that under this current catalog, the authority have moved around the puzzles a bit because some of the services which were categorized as type 1 in the previous draft of the catalog have now been categorized as type 2. But on the other hand, some services which used to be categorized as type 2 but now categorized as type 1. The reason or the rationale behind that is that the authority, they think type 1 value-added telecom services more relate to infrastructure. So that's why under the current catalog, the authority has classified internet connection and also the internet data center. They have categorized such services as type 1 because they think services such as IDC or internet connection are much more related to infrastructure. And then again, for e-commerce and multi-party real-time communication systems, so which are more related to customers and related to a public platform. So that's why they are now categorized as type 2 VATS services. The reason for such a classification because we think type 1 are more related to infrastructure, so you would expect the authority are likely to exercise a stronger review over the services in relation to type 1. But on the other hand, because type 2 are more related to public services or customer services, so there is less national security sensitivity in relation to type 2. So we would think that if your services fall within the scope of type 2, you'll probably expect a quicker or easier approval process if you need to obtain a permit or license from the authority to perform type 2 services. Okay, and then we move on to the next slide. For the next slide, I'm going to discuss to look at what impacts the new China Telecom Catalog would have for TMT SMEs in China. I think probably this is more important than the content of the previous slides, because the impacts or the implications for the TMT SMEs would be more meaningful to the companies or to the audience today. Firstly, I think the one of the most important impact for the catalog for SMEs is that compare with the legal environment in this sector before, the catalog has shown the authorities' clear intention to bring new telecom or internet services under regulation. As I explained earlier, cloud computing, that is one of the biggest example to show that authority, they have a very clear intention to regulate this industry sector. So that means in the past, given that the law is not clear on cloud computing, some companies may have delivered or performed cloud computing business in China without having any permit. But under the new catalog, new catalog 2015, it means cloud computing business will be subject to the permit requirement in China, and then a company which has performed cloud computing business before, if they want to continue their business, the cloud computing business in China, they will need to consider taking necessary steps as soon as possible with a view to applying for a proper permit in China. Otherwise, it may present legal risk or other potential exposure for them to perform cloud computing in business without having a permit. And also another important impact for TMT SMEs is that the reclarification of certain services, certain value-added telecom services may mean the different approval procedure or methodology for your services in China. For example, if you plan to do e-commerce business in China, I think probably you would be glad to know that the relaxation for e-commerce has been improved a lot. So first, as I explained earlier, firstly, if you want to do cross-border e-commerce, you can set up your e-commerce wholly foreign-owned company in China very quickly, and normally you do not need to find a local partner to do the business to set up your company. So you can have your 100% foreign, 100% wholly owned company for yourself. So you can control that company more easily, and also you can make the decision very quickly. And also for e-commerce, the new catalog, it has been categorized as type 2, which means the authority has regarded e-commerce as something more related to public or customer services, which means when you want to apply for a telecom, value-added telecoms permit for e-commerce, the authority probably will take a less stringent, less strict approach in reviewing and granting and approving your permit. So you could probably expect a shorter and quicker procedure to obtain a permit for cross-border e-commerce. And also we move on to the next slide, and also this is the last slide for today's presentation. And then given what we have discussed today, and probably you want to consider what would be the next step for your business in China. So if you are somebody who has already started the value added or internet services in China, and you have already obtained a permit in China to perform the regulated telecom or internet services already, you may wonder whether you need to reapply your permit under the new catalog. Actually, you do not have to. So if your current permit you have is still within its validity term, then you can continue to use your existing license to do business until the expiry of its full term. For example, if the current permit you have, which is normally 5 years, is valid for 5 years. So for example, if your current permit will expire in 31st December 2018, and then you can continue to use your current permit until the 31st December 2018. And then if you have not got any license, your permit and tour in China, but the business you're trying to do in China will need to have a permit under the new catalog. And then because the catalog has become effective from 1st of March 2016, this means you must apply for a new permit under the new catalog. And then you need to look at the new catalog to determine what kind of permit you will need to apply for, and to whom you need to apply for, and what kind of application documentation you would need to make a submission to the authority. And also, if your services you are currently doing in China has been recategorized into a different type, for example, as I mentioned earlier, under the new catalog, there has been some reshuffle of the classification of the permits. So maybe if you have a permit in China already, which was categorized as type 1, but now it has been categorized as type 2, and then you need to look at your permit and also discuss with the authority to see if you need to do some procedures and to apply for a new license to suit your business under the new catalog. And also, so all this means that the business operators in telecom and in internet services in China, they will need to review the permits and the business in China to ensure that they are complied with the new catalog. Because if under the new catalog, if there are some new requirements and you fail to comply with that, and then you will be exposed to the risks and exposure that the authority may come to you at some point require you to comply with the regulation. And normally the authority will issue a warning notice and to require you to rectify, to make it good within a prescribed period of time. And but if you fail to do that within the given time, and then the authority, they may decide to take some actions to the next level. For example, they may impose an administrative fine, or they may ask you to stop doing business in China. So that's why it's very important that you need to review your business and also your license practice in China to ensure that the relevant requirements under the new catalog are complied with. And also turning back to the opportunities we just mentioned earlier, that for the Shanghai Free Trade Zone and another 3 free trade zones in China, there are certain special relaxations offered to those free trade zones. So if you are considering coming to China to set up any business here in this industry sector, I think one important factor you can take into account is to consider the free trade zone. Because the free trade zone definitely presents something which generally are not available to other parts of China yet. For example, in the free trade zone, you can enjoy a higher foreign ownership percentage in the company. For example, even for some sectors such as e-commerce or offshore call centers, you can have your 100% subsidiaries in China. And also for those free trade zones, even though you are still subject to certain foreign ownership restrictions, the approval or the administrative procedures in those free trade zones are also less time consuming than what you can expect in other parts of China. For instance, in our experience, we recently advised international client for setting up a company in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. And in Shanghai Free Trade Zone, firstly, you can set up your company very quickly. And if as compared to other parts of China, for example, if you set up a company in like Beijing, and then normally you would expect 2 or 3 months to get your company approved and fully up and running. But as opposed to that, but if you are going to set up a company in Shanghai, so basically in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, basically you can have your company set up in a very short period of time, just like 4 or 5 working days, and you can get the business license for your company set up in Shanghai very quickly. And so that is something, it's a very attractive to many of our international companies. And also, after you set up your local company to obtain the business license, if the business you want to do is still subject to additional operational permit, and then and Shanghai Free Trade Zone, normally you would expect a quicker procedure to obtain to get to your operating permit issued in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. So generally speaking, those free trade zones have provided a very attractive option for many international companies trying to do business or set up a presence in China. I think for the final point regarding the relaxation for the approval procedure for e-commerce and offshore call center, and also for type 2 VATS, we have touched upon on that already. I think basically, yeah, I also wish to leave some time to open the floor for Q&A. So yeah, and that's above all I have to say regarding my presentation, and then we can leave some time for the Q&A, and we have received some questions already. And also in the meanwhile, you probably can see on your screen the slide, that is the last slide, that is my contact details. So if you have any questions or any queries regarding anything we discussed today or some other issues, and please, you're most welcome to send us questions by typing the questions to us, and also please also feel free to send an email or give me a call by using the contact details listed on your screen now.
Now you can write your questions, and we will ask to Barbara the questions. But I have a couple of questions here that we have a couple of questions that we have been receiving during your presentation. The first thing that I would like to add, the two first questions are quite related. When foreign businesses want to come to China and they want to invest in China, one of the main documents they have to check is the Foreign Investment Catalogue. We would like to understand what is the relation between the Foreign Investment Catalogue and the Telecommunications Catalogue.
Yes, that's a very good question. The foreign investment catalog is related to the China Telecom Catalog, but actually they are also independent from each other. The foreign investment catalog is just like a Bible for foreign companies are coming into China. So for whatever industry sector you want to do business in China, I think probably the first policy or first law you need to review is a foreign investment catalog. The foreign investment catalog, there have been several versions issued already. I think the most recent version was issued in 2014, and issued by MOFCOM and NDRC. The foreign ownership, the foreign investment catalog shows the industry sectors where foreign investors are encouraged, permitted, or restricted or prohibited to make investment in China. That catalog, I think the majority of that foreign investment catalog provides that a wide range of industry sectors are encouraged or permitted for foreign companies to make investment. But also there are two short lists in the catalog showing that for industries falling within those two short lists, foreign companies are not allowed to make investment. For example, the Chinese herbal medicine or the gambling, and those sectors actually are not allowed for any foreign company to make investment at all. And then there is also a list of restricted industry sector. If what you are trying to do falls within the restricted list, it means foreign companies, you can still make investment in that industry sector, but you will need to go to the higher level of Chinese governmental authority for approval. And also in some sectors in that restricted list, you will be required to set up a JV with a local Chinese partner. And even for some sectors, the catalog requires the Chinese partners, your Chinese investors, they have to have over 50% ownership in the JVs. So for the foreign investment catalog, so you definitely need to look at before you start to make any investment in China. And then it's a relationship with the China Telecom Catalog. I think the Telecom Catalog only applies to the China Telecom and Internet sectors. So as opposed to the foreign investment catalog that applies to a wide range of industry sectors. So that covers more industry sector. So the China Telecom catalog is much more industry specific, and you can see there are some overlapping between the foreign investment catalog and the China Telecom catalog, especially in relation to telecom and internet sectors. But the scope of the China investment catalog is a lot wider than the China Telecom catalog, and the China Telecom catalog is much more industry specific.
There's a person that is asking what TMT means.
Okay, TMT is a short name for telecommunication media and telecommunication media, technology, media, and telecommunication.
So, my second question related to what I just mentioned of the investment catalog and this catalog is, we heard the people that are aware about the policy environment here in China and also follow the negotiations between EU and China on the investment agreement, they hear a lot the word negative list. So, and we know that China is working on a national negative list for foreign investment in China. How will this affect foreign investment in China? Will this have any implication when they have to apply for licenses, or what will be the implications for foreign businesses to have a negative list.
Right.
And especially for the telecom service.
Telecom, okay. I think the negative list is more related to foreign investment catalog, because in the current version of the foreign investment catalog, it is still not a negative list. It's not structured as a negative list. It's much more structured as a positive list. So which means if the industry you're trying to do is not on the list, and then there's a big question mark that you cannot do that in China. So the negative list, the authority is trying to do it in a different way. So the negative list acts as a blacklist. So if what you are trying to do is not listed in the negative list, in the blacklist, which means you can do. So which means what you can do, the scope, what you can do is wider, is much broader than the current positive list. And the negative list, for the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, the negative list has been rolled out for the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. And the Chinese authority has tried to use the Shanghai Free Trade Zone as a testing stone to see how the negative list will be rolled out. And my personal view is that the negative list has worked out in Shanghai Free Trade Zone pretty well. Although there are some negative comments that the negative list for the Shanghai Free Trade Zone is still very long. So which means there are still a lot of business sectors foreign investor cannot do business. So hopefully in the future the negative list will get shorter, which means actually the scope what you can do business will be much broader than before. The negative list, so it's much more related to the foreign catalog. But in terms of the telecom catalog, as I mentioned, the telecom catalog is more related to the industry regulation. So it's much more about the industry supervision, the industry monitoring, the industry operation permit. So it's it's related, but it's still different from the foreign ownership or foreign investment. So the negative list is much more related to the foreign investment catalog, but less directly related to the China telecom catalog.
Another question we have also is related to the free trade zones, because we received several questions several times of people asking, if I get a license in the free trade zone, the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, for example, does it mean that I have a license for whole China or only for the free trade zone?
For the, I think that's one of the beauties for the free trade zone. If generally speaking, if you get a permit for the free trade zone issued by the authority located in the free trade zone, in most cases you can do business all over China on a national basis, which means you do not need to obtain another permit from other authorities, from the non-free trade zone authority. And so I think that's one of the big advantages for setting up your company in the free trade zone. So basically you can have a shorter, and you can get your company set up a lot quicker in free trade zone than the non-zone area. And also the authority, they take a more relaxed approach in the free trade zone when they review your application for the permits. And after you get the permits from the free trade zone, in most cases you can use your permit for the business all over China. So you do not need to obtain another permit in Beijing or in Hebei province. So you actually can use the permit you received in free trade zone for your business in other parts of China. But having said that, you still need to look at the nature of your business and the work you're trying to do in China on a case-by-case basis. Because for some work or some business, the permit may only give you the right to do business within a specified geography area. So for example, if the permit says you obtain from the Shanghai Free Trade Zone says you are only allowed to do permit within one city, and then that means we cannot use that permit to do business in other parts of China. Take an example of e-commerce. So for example, for e-commerce, that's something a lot of people are very keen to obtain an e-commerce permit in China. So for e-commerce, the authority, they manage the permits according to the scope and nature of the business you are trying to do. For some, they have the within city permit, and also they have the national permit. So for example, if your e-commerce you obtain from the Shanghai Free Trade Zone Authority, it's just a permit for e-commerce within one city, and then that means even if you got the permit from the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, it's because of the permit only give you the right to do e-commerce within one city. Actually, you cannot use that permit for e-commerce, in 5 or 6 provinces in China. But on the other hand, if the permit you get from the Shanghai Free Trade Zone is a national permit, which allows you to do e-business in all the provinces or cities in China, and then actually that permit you obtain from the Shanghai Free Trade Zone will be good enough for your e-commerce on a national basis. So it's not just about whether the permit is issued by the Shanghai Free Trade Zone. It's much more about the content of the permit, whether the permit would allow you to do something on a wider range.
For which kind of areas or which kind of businesses you could get this wider range permit?
For example, like e-commerce, e-commerce and cloud computing, they are all possible to get the permit on a wider range. So you do not have to limit yourself to business just within 1 or 2 cities or provinces. But if you want to get a wider range permit, when you first make the submission to the authority may require you to provide more supporting documents to support your application for the wider permit. For example, if you try to obtain a permit for a national business, the authority may need you to provide stronger financial supporting documents, and also your feasibility study report for your business model. You may still need to submit or provide some extra or additional documents to support your application. So that's something you need to take into account when you decide what kind of a permit you want to go with. And also if you go for a national permit, the authority may need longer time to review, and then that is also a factor you need to take into account when you decide what kind of permit you want to go for in the first place. For example, we have some clients we work with. Some of them, they wish to roll out their business more quickly. So they wanted to start with a permit, a kind of a narrow permit. They can start with that narrow permit quickly. And after they build up their narrow business, and then they can consider to expand the business and to upgrade the business, the permit to the wider range. So it's very much depend on the business model of the company, and what kind of what nature or what scale of business they want to start with, and how much time and they have for them to obtain all the permit to do business in China. So it's a lot more different consideration, a lot more different factors they need to take into account when they decide what kind of a permit or what kind of approval procedures they want to go for in the first place. Okay, so probably we only have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I have more questions, but maybe we can, or let me ask you the last question I have.
Okay.
Because we talked about the free trade zones, but for example, last year, my colleagues and me, we attended a seminar organized by the Beijing municipality, and although Beijing is not a free trade zone, they were talking or they were presenting this project that they're doing here in Beijing for opening services. How can this affect USMEs in the TMT area that would like to do business? Would be Beijing a good place to start also, or does it mean also that they will cut the administrative burden? What does it mean, this?
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, because we are all based in Beijing here, so we're quite familiar with the approval procedures run by the authorities, officials in Beijing. My personal observation is that although Beijing is not one of the free trade zones, we cannot enjoy, for companies setting up in Beijing, cannot enjoy the incentives or the favorable treatment available to free trade zone. But on the other hand, I think to set up a business and have a presence in Beijing also presents something which is not available from other cities or other zones. For example, for TMT sector, I think Beijing generally, the innovation or the investment environment actually probably it's one of the best in the country, in China. So in Beijing, most of the large Chinese internet companies, they are headquartered in Beijing. 3 of the 2 big VAT companies, Baidu, they are headquartered in Beijing, and JD.com are headquartered in Beijing, and a lot more. The telecom and the industry and the internet companies, they are headquartered in Beijing. And also Beijing houses the Chinese central authorities. So especially for TMT, because you actually need to, quite often you need to talk to the authorities especially if you want to roll out any new business model in China, and you need to talk to the authorities to get their ideas. So whether you can do this or you can do that, and what kind of incentives you'll be able to enjoy by doing that business in China. So I think Beijing provides something which is quite beneficial to companies because you are closer to the authorities, and there is a lot more information sharing in Beijing, especially in the Beijing community, especially for the TMT. And I think that is significantly important for SMEs in China. And also the Beijing authorities, the municipality, they also have taken a very good approach to try to convert Beijing into high-end TMT service center. For example, in Beijing, we have Zhongguancun, which is a Chinese Silicon Valley. And also the Beijing authority, they have allocated quite a few different areas or different zones for favorable treatments. For example, the companies can enjoy certain tax incentives or the financial support or financial grants by setting up their company or their headquarters in Beijing. So I think Beijing still presents very good opportunities for international SMEs in doing business here to have a foothold setting up in Beijing.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Very, very useful, very insightful, this presentation. We hope that the audience, our SMEs also enjoyed it. And if you want to know more about the ICT market in China, you can go to the website of the USME Center and download the ICT market in China report. We also have some case studies of SMEs that have been quite successful here in China in the ICT market. And I would also encourage you to visit our website and see the China Business Solutions. The China Business Solutions are services that the USME Center provides to help European SMEs develop successfully their business in the country. And it's a first line of advice. There are some of the services that are paid for services, but tailored to the needs of the SMEs. And there you can find Chinese market research, how to export products to China, selling services to and technologies to China, finding the Chinese distributors and agents. Also, we can help you with company verification in China, and there are also some other additional services that you can find in our website. Thank you very much for listening to our webinar, and thank you again, Barbara.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.